Well, good afternoon. It's June 17th, 2020. And in light of some of the COVID-19 restrictions that are being placed on universities with regard to field days, many of us across the Midwest and the Mid-South area are doing these video recordings to try to get some of our information out to the end users. And so today what we're going to do is we're going to walk down through some plots that we've sprayed some burn down treatments on about 12 days ago. And basically what I want to do is kind of walk you through some of the things that we're seeing. And this would be kind of a central or west central Indiana type of environment that we've had this spring. And we want to talk about some of the efficacy that we're seeing on mare's tail on one side and giant ragweed on the other side. And then we'll give you some conclusions to what we're seeing here at the end. The first thing we'll do here is we'll set up our plot layout and application parameters. So the first series of treatments we're going to discuss were applied on June 5th. Our weather conditions were mid-80s as far as temperature, and we were coming off a little bit of a wet spell. And so our plants were well hydrated, so we hadn't experienced any drought stress yet. And our horseweed was anywhere from 4 to 12 inches in height. Sprayer was set up with 15 gallon per acre of carrier volume, and these were walked on with a backpack sprayer. So the way the plots are laid out, the sign is in the middle of the plot, and we have untreated running checks, which I'll point out as we move further down the line here to kind of show you what the weeds would look like in these running checks, and this would be an unsprayed area. Okay, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to walk you through 4 different treatments. So we've got an untreated check here, we've got a glyphosate product in the next one, and then a glyphosate plus 2,4-D and a glyphosate plus dicamba. So I'm standing now in the untreated plot. We are 12 days after the application of the treatments in the other plot. The horseweed ranged from 4 to 12 inches in height when it was sprayed. And now we have horseweed ranging anywhere from about 8 to probably 24 inches tall or so. So this is what an untreated check looks like. As I move in this direction here, I'm moving into the plot that was treated only with glyphosate. So obviously this is a glyphosate resistant population of horseweed. You can see a few dead plants in here, but for the most part, what you see are plants that were initially injured by glyphosate. They would show some yellowing in the tops, and then they started to regrow. So we have thinned the population a little bit, but I would say well over 90% of this population is glyphosate resistant. So this was a very common site in the state of Indiana dating back to 2001, 2002, 2003. And so most of the state then at that point made some pretty quick transitions to doing different things, whether that was adding post-emergence chlorimuron or chloranthalam to their glyphosate program, getting some 2,4-D in the burn down to try to get this mare's tail population to behave more like we want it to behave. So one of the most common things that was done back in that era, and one of the cheaper things, or probably the cheapest thing, was simply to get some 2,4-D in the burn down treatment. So again, we're 12 days out here. And when we compare the control with glyphosate alone versus glyphosate plus 2,4-D, it's definitely better. But what you can see here is even with adding an auxin herbicide, whether it's 2,4-D or whether it's dicamba, we are not getting very rapid control of these plants. So we've beat them up pretty effectively. I think we've largely protected soybean yield if we can come back in here and finish these off with 2,4-D, dicamba, or Liberty. But to get an effective burn down, even when we have hot, sunny weather, throughout most of the state of Indiana now, we need to do something more than just adding 2,4-D or dicamba to our burn down treatment. And that's why we talk an awful lot during our summer meetings about doing fall applied herbicides to get those mare's tail controlled that emerged in the fall of the year. So that way we don't have a population like this that we have to deal with in the spring. So as I move over to this plot that had Roundup plus dicamba, again, we see a very similar scenario here with Roundup dicamba versus Roundup 2,4-D. We're 12 days out. The plants aren't dead. They probably haven't grown all that much, but anytime I still see green on a plant 12 to 14 days out, I'm concerned that I'm going to have to come back in here and retreat. Okay, we're moving down the line here into some of our other treatments, and I'm standing in the running check or an unsprayed area, and we've got two different treatments that we're going to discuss here. So the treatment on my left would be Roundup plus Sharpen. The treatment on my right would be Roundup plus Sharpen plus 2,4-D, right? Yeah. Okay. So one of the things that became really obvious as we pointed out in the discussion of the previous plots was that adding 2,4-D or dicamba to glyphosate is better than glyphosate alone, but probably not getting us completely to where we want to be, where we want weeds that are for the most part dead at 12 to 14 days after treatment. So BASF developed the Safe Flufinicil product. I was part of that testing process around 15 years ago, and about 10 years or so ago that product came onto the market, and it really helped out in terms of being able to control mare's tail, giant ragweed, and some of the other weeds that are typically present early in the growing season. So what you can see here with this Roundup Sharpen treatment is we definitely have very good efficacy on the horseweed. We still have a few plants that have some green tops in them, and those plants will survive. They will go on and complete their life cycle if they're not treated again. But we've done a pretty good job of getting these things beat back and giving our post-emerge herbicide a better chance of working on a weed that's showing a little bit more injury symptoms. When we have the 2,4-D in with the Sharpen, what you can see here is better control. We still have some plants that have some green stems on them. We have a few regrowing in the front of the plot, which that could be a matter of getting the boom charged. But what you see as you scan the entire plot is you just don't see the plants that have the green tops in them. So having both the Sharpen and the 2,4-D with the glyphosate has been the best treatment that we've looked at so far today. All right. Now I'm standing in between our two gramoxone-based treatments. So we have gramoxone and a metribuzin-based product on my left. We have gramoxone, metribuzin, and 2,4-D on my right. And what you see here is, again, a very quick efficacy with these gramoxone-based treatments. With the gramoxone Syncor that doesn't have the 2,4-D in it, much like we saw with the Sharpen treatment that didn't have 2,4-D in it, you do see a lot more plants that are green in the top and that will go on and complete their life cycle. They're set back quite a bit. They can be finished off with a post-emerge treatment of the right mode of action. But if we simply add 2,4-D into our gramoxone-based treatments, the efficacy is a little bit higher here, not quite as good as what we're looking at with the glyphosate, Safe Flufinicil, and 2,4-D, but nonetheless, we did get a better kill where we had two alternative modes of action in this mixture as compared to the one alternative mode of action. Okay, and the last thing I want to talk about here with our mare's tail plots are these Liberty-based treatments. Now, typically we don't think of Liberty as a good burn down herbicide because Liberty as a herbicide works much better under sunny, hot conditions with high humidity. So typically if we're doing burn down treatments in April, we don't have that kind of weather in the eastern corn belt. Now, given the fact that we did these burn down treatments in early June, we had 80 degree and sunny weather, and we also had some well-watered plants. Liberty was really active, and that's kind of an optimal situation to use Liberty. So on the left here, we have Liberty plus. On the left here, we have Liberty by itself. On the right here, we have Liberty with 2,4-D, okay? So again, as you look across these plots, the efficacy was very fast. It's been fairly complete with both Liberty and the Liberty 2,4-D. And so for those of us that didn't get our beans planted in early May, if we're into this June planting time frame because of wet weather, or perhaps we're double cropping, this would be a good situation here to use a Liberty-based herbicide for a burn down program. So to wrap up our discussion of mare's tail burn downs with early June applied burn down treatments, obviously it's a glyphosate resistant population. Adding 2,4-D and dicamba to glyphosate was definitely better than glyphosate alone, but we really needed two or more active modes of action in that mixture to get effective burn down control. So treatments that had glyphosate plus Sharpen plus 2,4-D, Gramoxone, Sencor plus 2,4-D, or the Liberty-based programs were the programs that gave us the most thorough control of mare's tail. And again, what we're really trying to do is we're trying to get 98 to 99% control. We want to stunt these plants as much as possible, and we want to be able to have our give our post-emerge herbicide an opportunity to work. So that's kind of the summary of mare's tail burn down, and we'll go on and talk about giant ragweed next. One of the things that we frequently encounter in our no-till systems in the state of Indiana is not only do we have things like mare's tail, chickweed, henbit, purple dead nettle, crestleaf groundsel, and some of the winter annual grasses to deal with, but it's not uncommon to have some of our early emerging summer annual weeds like giant ragweed, lamb's quarter, and foxtail to be emerged at the time that we're doing these burn down treatments. And so one of the things I think particularly that's become more important is the ability of this burn down herbicide to work on these early emerging summer annual weeds. So typically with grasses like foxtail or even fall panicum that might come up early, glyphosate works really well on those grasses. We haven't had any issues. Where we've run into challenges is getting good activity on lamb's quarter and giant ragweed in the spring under some cool, cloudy weather conditions. Now, the good news is that with the herbicides that we use in a burn down scenario, both lamb's quarter and giant ragweed are fairly easy to control. So efficacy is almost always fairly complete and fairly high when we have things like 2,4-D, dicamba, or saflufenicil, the Sharpen product, in the tank. So we didn't see quite the treatment separation out here with those particular herbicides, but the key thing to keep in mind is whenever we have cool, cloudy weather, we just need to be careful with lamb's quarter, because lamb's quarter becomes really tolerant to glyphosate treatments when we have cool, cloudy weather. Giant ragweed, on the other hand, giant ragweed is so sensitive to dicamba and 2,4-D that we really can have effective control of those weeds just by having at least 8 ounces. We'd like to see 16 or more, but at least 8 ounces of one of those products in the tank for a burn down situation. So we're not going to walk you through all these giant ragweed plots. We just basically wanted to give you a summary there that, again, for those weeds, dicamba or 2,4-D or Sharpen is going to be a very effective program. But if you have mare's tail, you need to make sure you have at least 2 active sites of action in there to pick up the mare's tail. Because it's probably not likely that you have many no-till fields that have giant ragweed and that don't have mare's tail, because mare's tail has become so prevalent over the last 15 to 20 years.
Hello, my name is Jesse Harmon. I'm a second-year PhD student with Bill Johnson in the Weed Science Group at Purdue. We're standing here at Davis Purdue Ag Center, where I'm overseeing 13 company field trials. These trials were planted in late May and received a half-inch of rain immediately after pre-emergence herbicide application. Throughout the month of June, though, we received relatively little rain, which slightly stressed the crops, but also led to exceptionally high pre-emergence herbicide efficacy.
Good morning. I'm Bill Johnson, Extension Weed Scientist at Purdue University. It's July 1st, 2020, and this morning we're here at the Davis Purdue Agricultural Center in Eastern Indiana, and we're shooting some videos of our weed control plots. So in this particular trial right here, we're looking at a lot of the commercially available atrazine premixes as a pre-emerge treatment alone and as a split treatment where we put on a portion of it pre-emerge and a portion of it post-emerge. So on my right-hand side, we have Resicor, full labeled rate of Resicor, and on the left-hand side, we have Harness Max. Okay, so these trials were initiated in late May, around May 26th. The pre-emerge treatments were put on May 26th, so it's July 1st, or about 5 weeks after the application date. Our weather conditions were, we had a ½ inch of rain almost immediately on these pre-emerge treatments. Then it was dry, very dry for about 3 weeks, and then more recently we've had some rainfall events. So what we have in the front on each side of me is a full labeled rate of Resicor and Harness Max, and in the plots directly behind me, these plots are 30 feet long, in the plots directly behind me, we have treatments of the same herbicides where some of it was put on pre-emerge, and then a post-emerge treatment of the same herbicide was put on around June 20th. And we're about 10 days or so after that post-emerge treatment. So what this very clearly shows is that pre-emerge herbicides are very valuable to use at planting. And what we see here, where we have the full labeled rate pre-emerge, is we have held the weeds back easily for 5 weeks, but we're starting to have some breaks now. Okay, so this particular corn is at the V7 stage. It's about knee high on me. So we're kind of getting into a situation where we have limited things that we can do from a post-emerge standpoint because the corn is at an advanced growth stage. It's beyond the V6, which really starts to limit what we can do. Now, if we take a look at the plots directly behind these, where we had some of the pre-emerge herbicide put on at planting and then some of it about 10 days or so ago, those plots are completely weed-free at this stage. And so it does show the advantage of breaking up that residual, putting some of it on pre-emerge, some of it on post-emerge, and that helps to buy you a little bit of insurance against situations where we run into dry spells or extremely wet spells and our pre-emerge herbicides start to break early.